All right, so I'm gonna pull it up online like if y'all were actually taking it online. Let me move this out of the way. All right, so number one here wants to determine visually whether the function is even, odd, or neither. So remember, if it's even, it's going to touch the x-axis an even number of times. If it's odd, it'll touch the x-axis an odd number of times. And then also remember, even functions are symmetric to the y-axis, and odd functions are symmetric to the origin. So if you notice, this one's touching it once here and once here, so it's touching an even number of times. So I'm going to go with an even function. And also, if you notice, if I fold the graph over this y-axis right here, this side on the right side will land right on the side on the left, which definitely makes it an even function. All right, so let's go to the next one. All right, so determine how the given function can be obtained from one of the basic graphs. So it looks like the basic function is going to be the x squared graph because we see an exponent 2 here. So what we want to know is what's this plus 3 doing inside the parentheses, and what's this plus 4 doing on the outside of the parentheses. So first of all, you're going to start with the graph of x squared. So you put in your x squared graph. So let me move this out of my way. All right, so you got to hit that little, let me get inside the box. Click this for my exponent of 2. Then it said shift it blank 3 units. Well, that 3 is inside the parentheses with the x. So remember, when we add inside parentheses, we move left. When we subtract a number inside parentheses, we move right. So since we're adding 3, we're going to move left those 3 units, and then blank 4 units. So remember, at the end, if you got a number added at the end, it's going to move you up if it's positive and down if it's negative. So since that's positive, it will move me up 4 units. Then y'all, what you could do on that, if you want to see what's happening on it, I'm going to go to my calculator real quick. And show you on this calculator here, you could go to your y equals. Let me let one in real quick. And punch in x squared. And then right under it, do x plus 3 in parentheses, square that. And then what was it? Plus 4 at the end. So now if you graph them both, you can see the first graph will come right down in the center. And then look at my graph. It went left and up. So you can sort of tell by that you had to move left and then you went up 4, okay? So if you want to graph them real quick, that'll be all right. So then we have to graph this. Now remember, what I'm going to do, since that's the x squared, you're going to use this quadratic tool right here for the x squared tool, and then click it right in the center. It'll draw a parabola. What we got to do is use these little shifters down here to move the graph. So we went left 3, so that would be horizontal to a -3. And see, it moved it over. And then we went up 4 units, which would be vertical to a +4. And notice that looks like the second graph that was on my calculator a while ago. So I would save that and then move on. All right, so this is saying how can the graph of the square root of x plus 8 be obtained from the basic graph. What are giving me the basic graph is the square root graph. So remember, when you're under that radical, it's like you're in parentheses, okay? Everything under a radical, we treat like it's in parentheses. So since that 8 is being added to the x, we're going to move it left 8 units. So this would say go left, and then on this one you got to put in the 8. And then we got to pick which graph went left. So y'all, A went right, B went down, C went up, and D went left. Because remember, they always start in the center. So since that one went left over here, I'm going to click D and then move on. All right, now notice, how can the graph of the function be obtained from one of the basic graphs? So I'm still seeing an exponent 2 here. So it's still going to be the x squared graph, and they're telling me that right here. So I need to figure out what that negative's doing there, what that negative 4 is doing, and what that positive 5 is doing. So this first one says shifted. So here we go. They're starting with the 4 or the 5. Let's see. So that 4 is negative, so it's really going to go right 4. So I would click on the right 4. And then the 5, since it's at the end, it's not going to go left or right. It's going to go up or down. Then it says reflected across the, that's what this negative is doing. And the only axis we're flipping anything across at this point is the x-axis. And then it says shifted blank units. So since that's a positive 5 at the end, it's going to go up 5. So they're just trying to mix the numbers up on these to see if y'all are going to pick the right, left or right, or up and down on them, okay? All right, so we would put that in and then move on to the next one. All right, I'm going to do this one by hand, so let me write this down. This says find the zeros of the function, and they got f of b equals b squared plus 11b plus 24. All right, so I'm going to go to my pad real quick. All right, so different ways you can do this. The first method is to factor this. So you want to set b squared plus 11b plus 24 equal to 0. So the first way we'll do this is by factoring. And then the second way I'll do it is by the quadratic formula. So if you solve this by factoring, you're going to come down and put your parentheses. Everything's still set equal to 0. You got a b squared in the front, which means you'll put a b in front of both parentheses. Then I look at this last sign. Since this last sign's positive, that means both of these factors will have the same sign as that middle number, so they'll both be positive. And then let's find factors of 24. That could be 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. One of these will add to get 11, and that would be 3 and 8. So what you'll do is put a 3 here and an 8 here, or you could put the 8 first and then the 3. It don't matter because they're both positive. So now that you got it factored, you would take both of those factors and set equal to 0. So if y'all came out of foundations class, y'all probably did a lot of this factoring. So let's see, the first one I would subtract 3 from both sides, and I get b is a -3. The second one I would subtract 8 from both sides and get b is a -8. So the first way would be to come in and factor it. The second way, remember, if you're weak at factoring, you can always use the quadratic formula, which says x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. And y'all, I'll tell you what, this formula will solve every quadratic equation. Factoring, sometimes they don't factor, so you have no choice but to use the quad, okay? So you're still going to set everything equal to 0. B squared plus 11b plus 24 equals 0. You're going to come in and find your 3 numbers. So since there's no number in front of the b squared, it's a 1. The b in the middle is 11, and then the c would be 24. So we're going to plug that into that formula and get our answers. So x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So b was 11. I put that in those 2 spots. A was 1, so I put that in those 2 spots. And then c was 24. All right, so negative times a positive 11 makes that a negative 11. So that negative always changes the sign of what was in the middle. All right, y'all, under the radical, 11 squared, 11 times 11 is 121. And then notice you only got one negative on the right side, so that's going to stay negative. And then let's see, 4 times 24, I think that's 96. So you got 121 minus 96, all of that over 2 times 1, which is 2. All right, one more step under the radical. Let's subtract that and see what we get. So we get negative 11 plus or minus square root 121 minus 96 leaves me 25 all over 2. All right, so there's nothing else to do now but take the square root of that 25. So this negative 11 will come down, plus or minus. Square root of 25 is 5. Now, notice, once I take the square root, that radical's gone. And then all that's over 2. So you cannot simplify this no more. So what we got to do is use this plus and minus to get the 2 answers. So the first answer, I'm going to take negative 11 plus 5 divided by 2. So negative 11 plus 5 is negative 6 divided by 2, which gives me negative 3. So notice I got negative 3 won't go. To get the second answer, we use the subtraction and we do negative 11 minus 5 over 2, which is what? Negative 16 over 2, which gives us negative 8. I'm not going to lie, the quadratic formula is a little bit more tedious to work than factoring. But y'all, factoring don't work 100% of the time. And I know that the quadratic formula will. Now, if you downloaded the program that I sent y'all, all you had to do on that problem was hit program, go to the quad I sent you, hit enter on quad, and then hit enter again, and it asks for the numbers. We had a 1, 11, and 24. And y'all, once you put in the 3 numbers and hit enter, you get negative 3 and negative 8. So no matter which way you go, you're going to get negative 3, negative 8. So let me go back to the computer now. So we'll put, this says, let's see, negative 3, comma, negative 8. So notice I didn't have to put the x equals or the b equals on that. I just had to put in that, okay? So then I would move to my next question. All right, so find the zeros of the function algebraically is the same thing as we just did. So I got a 2x squared minus a x plus 2. All right, so let me go back to the pad. So if this was going to factor, we'd have to multiply 2 times 2 and get 4. We would have to find factors of 4 that would add to get a 1. There's no factors of 4 that add to get 1, so this one does not factor. So we must use the quad. So you got no choice but to use the quadratic formula for this one, okay? So we're going to take 2x squared minus x plus 2 and set it equal to 0. And figure out our three numbers. We got A will be 2 this time, B will be -1, and then C will be a positive 2 at the end. All right, so let's plug it in. We know x equals -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c, all that over 2 times a. So b was -1, so I'm going to put that in both of them spots. A was a 2, we put that there and on the bottom. And C was a 2, and that goes at the end. All right, so first thing we'll do, that double negative, negative times negative makes that a +1 plus or minus square root -1 squared. Now y'all watch this. If you do -1 on your calculator and square it, that's the wrong answer. You got to put that -1 inside parentheses when you square it on the calculator. So that -1 times -1 is a +1. All right, this end only has one negative, so it's going to stay negative. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. And then all that's over, 2 times 2 is 4. All right, so next, work under the radical. So bring down to 1, plus or minus, square root. 1 minus 16 is a -15, all over 4. So remember, what you got to do now is simplify that radical. So I'm going to do some side work on the radical. So to simplify a radical, you got to pull out any factors of 4s, 9s, 16s, 25s, 36, 49, 64. I got these numbers by 2 times 2, 3 times 3, 4 times 4. But all these numbers you can take square roots of, okay? And they keep going, okay? But for my number, I only had a 15, so I think we're covered. So the question is, does 15 divide by 4? No. Does 15 divide by 9? No. Everything else is too big, so I know the 15 won't simplify, but remember, we cannot leave that negative under that radical. So I would bring out a -1 and then make that a 15. So under these radicals, -1 times 15 still equals a -15, okay? We're just splitting it apart. But remember now, there's a little symbol I can replace that square root of -1 with, and that is the I. And remember, that I means that these are now imaginary answers instead of real. So if you got a negative under a square root, you bring it out as a I. So I'm going to replace the square root of -15 with that. So I get 1 plus or minus I square root of 15 all over 4. And y'all, at that point, I cannot simplify this anymore, so I'm done. And MATLAB should let us put it in with the plus or minus, okay? So y'all watch this. This calculator knocked that out. Let's see. Quad enter. I had a 2, -1, and a 2. Now remember, there you go. 1 plus I squared of 15 over 4. 1 minus I squared of 15 over 4. Now I'm going to show you how I'm going to put this one in the MATLAB. On this one, I would first start out getting the fraction. Now on top of my fraction, I got 1. I'm going to use this plus or minus down here. And then I have an I, which is right next to it almost. And then the square root. And under the square root, I'm going to put my 15. Now, click to the bottom and put a 4. Okay? So this thing is really picky about... Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to check that. I wanted to go to the next question. All right, this one has everything given to us on this page. It wants to know the x-intercepts. So remember, x-intercepts are where it's crossing the x-axis, and they got 2 dots for those. Now, the trick on this is for each point, you got to use your parentheses. To be an x-intercept, the second number automatically has to be a 0. Right? Because on the y-axis, on the x-axis, that's the 0 point of the graph. So let's see what this one looks like. That looks like that is sitting at a -1. So I'm going to put a -1, comma 0 for my first point. Now, arrow out, put a comma in between the ordered pairs. And then I'm going to click the second ordered pair. And I know the second number has to be a 0. So what we got to figure out is what this first number is on the right. So that looks like what? 1, 2, 3. So that point will be 3, 0. And remember, this question was just designed so that y'all would realize that x-intercepts, the first number of the x-intercept is the same as the solutions. So the solutions would be -1, comma 3. Okay. Now you could also factor that or use the quadratic formula on the x squared minus 2x minus 3, and it'll give you them 2 answers. All right, y'all, then we would move on. So here's the thing on this one. There's 2 problems in a row, this number 8 and number 9. I took number 8 off of the test. So we'll work this still because y'all got to do the practice quiz if you want to. But number 8 will not be on the test. I took 5 questions off of this, okay? So let me draw the main thing. I got an antenna tower with a wire stretched to it. I know the wire is 17 feet long. The height of this tower is 7 feet greater than the distance from the tower's base to the wire. So I don't know the distance from the base to the wire, so that's going to be D, they're saying. But I do know the height of that radio tower is 7 feet taller, so that'll be D plus 7. So they want to know the distance from the wire to the tower and then the height of that tower. So let's go to this one and see what we can do. All right, so right here I drew the picture. Here's my tower. I had a 17-foot wire stretched to the top of my tower. So I knew that was 17. I knew the height of this tower was 7 feet more than this distance D from the tower to the wire. So remember, that made a right triangle, okay, which means this right side is my longest side, so that's my hypotenuse, so that has to be my C. And then this can be A, and this can be B, or that can be A, and that can be B. It don't matter on that part, okay? The only thing that matters is C has to be the 17. So we was playing with the Pythagorean theorem, which said A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I know my A, that's going to be D, so D squared plus B is D plus 7 squared is going to equal C, which is 17 squared. Okay, so you might do a little bit of side work on the D plus 7. So D plus 7 squared would be D plus 7 times D plus 7. So you got to fool that, okay? So D times D is D squared. D times 7 is 7D. 7 times D is 7D. And then 7 times 7 is 49. So the last step I'm going to do is add the like terms. So I get a D squared. 7 plus 7 give me 14D plus 49. So let me bring that down. I got a D squared plus that gave me D squared plus 14D plus 49. All right, y'all, let's see what 17 squared is. That'll be 289 on the right side. All right, so two things I need to do. I need to add these like terms together. So D squared plus a D squared gives me 2D squared plus 14D plus 49 equals 289. So since I got these squared terms in here, the D squared, I need a zero where the 289 is. So I'm going to subtract 289 from both sides. And numbers only subtract from numbers. So the 2D squared stays the same, plus the 14D. Let's see what 49 minus 289 equals. That equals what, a negative 240. All this is equal to 0. All right, y'all, next step, try to solve this. So since it's all set up equal to 0, I'm going to use the quadratic formula. So let me let y'all catch up because I'm going to use another page. Alrighty, so I'm at this point where I had a 2D squared plus 14D minus 240 all equals 0. All right, so I know A is 2, B is 14, C is a negative 240. So to solve this, I'm going to use my quadratic formula real quick. X equals negative B plus or minus square root B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. All right, so B was 14, so I'm going to put that there and there. A was 2, I'll put that there and there. And then C was a negative 240. All right, y'all, let's see what that does. That gives me a negative 14. Plus or minus, under the radical, 14 squared is what, 196? This side has two negatives. That's going to make that a positive. So let's see what we get. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 240 is going to give me 1920. All that's over 2 times 2, which is 4. Woo, big number under that radical. So negative 14 plus or minus. Let's see what that 1920 plus 196 gives us. Ooh, that's going to give me 2116. All this is over 4. All right, y'all, so now it is time to take the square root of that 2116. So I got a negative 14 plus or minus. So second x squared to get your radical, 2116 underneath. Woo, and that comes out as a 46. So remember, since I took the square root, I no longer have the radical, and then all that's over 4. So I'm going to get my first answer and then my second answer. First answer, I'm going to add negative 14 plus 46 divided by 4. Negative 14 and 46 is 32 divided by 4, which equals 8. Second answer, negative 14 minus 46 over 4. All right, y'all, let's see. That's going to give me what? A negative 60 over 4, which is a negative 15. All right, so the first thing I was looking for was the distance D from the wire to the base of my tower. So that is either going to be 8 or it's going to be negative 15. So distance can't be negative, so you got to cancel out the negative answer, which means that the distance from the base of the tower to the wire is 8 feet. So distance from tower to the wire is 8. So now they want to know, how high is the tower? Well, if you remember, we said the height of the tower was D plus, hold on, what was it? D plus 7, so my bad. We said the height of that tower was D plus 7. Well, we know D was 8, so that'll be 8 plus 7, which will give us 15. So the distance was 8, and then the height of that tower was 15. So we would go put that in. So notice they don't have 2 blanks here, so we needed what, 8 for that one. And then 15 for the second one. I'm going to hit these arrows up here, my bad. All right, so remember, put an X by that or a star. That one will not be on the test, but the next one will that I'm about to do. Y'all, let me write this one down. It says I got a wall here. So I got a wall with an extension ladder on it. The foot of the ladder is 5 feet from the wall, so I know that distance is 5. And then the height that the ladder reaches on the wall and the length of the ladder are consecutive integers. So that means that the height of the wall is X. Consecutive integer would be X plus 1. So consecutive integers means numbers that are right in a row, like 4 and 5 are consecutive, 7 and 8 are consecutive, and so on, okay? So now they want to know the length of that ladder. So let's go work this one. All right, so here's what I got. The ladder was 5 feet from the wall here. the height of the ladder on the wall and the ladder were consecutive integers, so x plus 1. Once again, this is a right triangle, and the longest side is my C, so I'm going to make this one A and that one B. So once again, we're going to the C squared equals A squared plus B squared. Or you could do A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So I just wanted to show you that it didn't matter what side you put stuff on, as long as this C squared is by itself and the A squared and B squared are on their own side, okay? All right, so C squared would be x plus 1 squared. That's going to equal my A squared, which was 5 squared, plus my B, which I'll call x squared. All right, so let's work this x plus 1 squared on the side. That's going to be x plus 1 times x plus 1. X times x is x squared. X times 1 is a 1x. 1 times x is a 1x. And then 1 times 1 is a positive 1. Adding the x's in the middle, you get an x squared plus 2x plus 1. I'm going to now replace the x plus 1 squared with that. So x squared plus 2x plus 1. That's going to equal the right side. 5 squared is 5 times 5 is 25 plus my x squared. So y'all, the first thing I would do to solve this, I would play with the x squareds. I always start my equations with the highest exponents, okay? So I'm going to subtract x squared to get them on the same side. But if you notice, what happens here is these x squareds cancel, leaving me a 2x plus 1. These x squareds cancel, leaving me just my 25. So now, since these x squared terms are gone, I don't have to use a quadratic formula. I don't have to factor that. All I got to do is get the x on one side equal to my numbers. So we would first start by subtracting the 1. So I get 2x equals 24. And then solve that by dividing by 2 so that x equals 12. So I know the height that the ladder is on my wall is going to be 12. But y'all, they want to know how long is that ladder. The ladder was x plus 1, which would be 12 plus 1, which means the ladder is 13 feet. So let me let y'all catch up, and then I'll go put in that one. And y'all remember, this one is definitely on that test, okay? All right, so I'm going to go new share. And then, oh, what I say, 13 on that. All right, so this one, all you had to do was notice this little point right here for everything you need. So I'm going to zoom that in just a little bit so I can see that. And that looks like, what, a 3, 1. So the vertex is actually that point they're giving us, which will be the 3, 1. So put in a 3 and then a 1. And notice it said type an ordered pair. Now the axis of symmetry is equal to the x value, but you got to write it like an equation. So you got to put x equals, where's my equals? X equals the x value, which is 3. So what that means that is, if you're looking at this, there'd be an imaginary line going down there at the x equals 3 value that cuts it in half. And then the minimum or maximum value is the y value. And you can tell that's the minimum it goes is to 1 on the y value. So we put a 1 in there. So this one really didn't have work. They just wanted you to be able to look at that graph and tell that that was the vertex. All right, now the biggest thing is, remember, axis of symmetry has to be x equals that number. All right, this one, number 11, I took off the test, but I'll actually work this. But this one I did take off. So let me see what they're giving us. F of x equals 2x squared plus 10x plus 15. They want me to find the vertex, axis of symmetry, min and max, and then graph it. All right, so I'm going to play for everything, and then we'll come back and put our answers in and graph. All right, so remember, I'm going to use the vertex formula to find that vertex. And the vertex formula says find negative b over 2a to get the x value. And then you put that value back into the function to get the y value. So that's what they mean by f of negative b over 2a. Whatever you get for the x, plug it into this function and get the y value, okay? So let's get the x value by doing negative b over 2a. That's going to be negative. B is 10. So notice that's going to make that sign change every time. Over 2 times a, which is 2. So that gives me a negative 10 over 4. Woo, let's see, we can reduce that. Negative 10 divided by 4 is going to give me a decimal, and then hit math and enter twice. And it reduces to a negative 5/2. So that means to get the y value, I'm finding f of a negative 5/2, which means take this equation, 2, and where they got an x, put negative 5/2. So I'm going to have 2 times negative 5/2 squared plus 10 times negative 5/2 plus 15. So we all got calculators, so I'm just going to punch this in on it. I got 2, and in parentheses, negative 5 divided by 2, close parentheses and square that, plus 10 times parentheses, negative 5 divided by 2, close parentheses, and then plus 15. When I hit enter, remember that gives me 2.5. I'm going to hit math and enter twice to turn that back into a, oh, what's that look like? 5/2? So that my vertex, y'all, is going to be a negative 5/2 and a positive 5/2. So then my axis of symmetry is equal to the x value. So my axis of symmetry will be x equals negative 5/2. Now I got to figure out if I got a min or max. Remember, if that first number is positive, you got a minimum. So remember, first number positive, so that means it's a minimum. Had I had a negative in the front of this, it would have been a maximum. So this one has a minimum of the y value, which was 5/2. All right, so I got everything. So now we're to the point where we're going to graph it. So let me go over here and share my screen. All right, so my vertex, I'm going to put that in first. I'm going to use my parentheses. I had a negative 5/2. So that'll be negative 5 divided by 2. And then I had a positive 5 divided by 2. The axis of symmetry was going to be x equals -5 divided by 2. We said the parabola had a minimum, so we're going to click on minimum. And then the minimum value was the y value, which was 5 divided by 2. All right, all that's in, so now I'm going to click it to graph. Now notice, since I got halves on the bottom of my fraction, this is broken into halves, okay? So remember, we click the parabola. The first thing I got to plot is my vertex. So I'm going to go left, -5 halves. So since this is broken into halves, I'm going to go left, -5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to put me at a -2.5, which is a -5 halves. And then up 5 halves. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then click. So remember, since this is broken into halves, I only need to go by the top number to go left and right. Now, y'all, you're going to need another point on this. So, oh, let me show you a trick. Let me see. I'm going to go graph this. So I got 2x squared plus 10x plus 15. And I'm just going to graph that. And then look at my table. So I know where the graph is, and I'm starting where I need to. So let's go to the value. Whoops, let me go to my table. Oh, I know what I did. Hang on. Let me clear this one. All right, now let me go to my table. So let me find numbers that are littler. Boy, I don't want them big ones. So notice here, at -3, I can plot a 3. So I'm going to go to -3 and then up 3. 1, 2, 3. Now remember, it takes 2 of these to go 1, because that's a half, right? So go 1, and then 2, and then 3. So I got that in there and save it. But y'all, does that not look like our graph? Okay. All right, let's see what's next was 12. 12, I think, was true and false. So this says the graph of h of x equals x minus 3 squared can be obtained by translating the graph of x squared left 3 units. So if that's inside parentheses and negative, it don't actually move me left, it actually moves me right. So since that would actually move right, that would be false. All right, then moving on. All right, so let's see. I'm going to find a lot on this one. So f of x equals x squared plus 4x plus 3. They want me to find a vertex, min or max value, the range, intervals of increasing and decreasing. Alrighty, so let's go find this vertex. So let me go to my screen. And y'all, after this one, we're going to take a break, all right? All right, so here we are. We know A is 1, B is 4, and C is 3. So let's find the x coordinate by doing -b over 2a. That's going to be -4 over 2 times 1, which gives me -4 over 2, which equals -2. So I know the x value. Now I'm going to plug that -2 back into these x's and get my y value. So I'm going to find f of -2. So that's going to be -2 squared plus 4 times -2 plus 3. All right, y'all, -2 times -2 is a +4. 4 times negative 2 is a negative 8. And then at the end is a positive 3. So 4 minus 8 is a negative 4. Negative 4 plus 3 is a negative 1. So my vertex is going to be negative 2, negative 1. Since this x squared is positive, this will have a minimum of negative 1, which is my y value. All right, and then we'll go back to the graph and do the increasing and decreasing, okay? All righty, so go to their screen. All right, so let's do the vertex first. That's going to be an ordered pair, so I'm going to click the ordered pair, and we got a negative 2 and a negative 1. So we said it had a minimum because it opens upward, and it had a minimum value of negative 1. So then it says, what is the range? Well, since this opens upward, the smallest y value is negative 1. So the range is going to go from that negative 1. Now, we need a square bracket on this. So let me see. Do they give you square brackets on more? Oh, let me see. Oh, I'm not seeing the square bracket, so I'm going to use the one on my computer. It's right by the P on the computer. Hit that bracket. And the smallest value was negative 1, comma. Now remember, this thing opens upward, so that means that these y values keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So they're headed off towards infinity. And remember, infinity always uses a, oh, where's the parentheses? Oh, right up here to 0. So infinity always has curvy parentheses, okay? Now this says it's increasing. So remember, it's opening upward. So the left half is actually decreasing because you got to read it left to right. So it's increasing from that vertex to the right. So we're going to use curvy parentheses for the increase and decreasing is always the curvy parentheses. It starts at that x value of negative 2. And then as the graph heads towards positive infinity, it's increasing. All right, then it wants to know when is it decreasing. Well, it's decreasing coming in from the left until it gets to that vertex. So we still want curvy parentheses. It's coming in from the left means it's coming in from negative infinity. And then it's decreasing until it hits that negative 2. So the vertex gives me a lot of information. It tells me where the graph switches from decreasing to increasing. It gives me a line of symmetry. It gives me minimum or maximum values. Okay. All right, this one didn't want me to graph it, so we can move on. All right, so I'm gonna let y'all take a 10-minute break real quick. So let me pause, see what our next problem is. All right, so 14 here has been taken off the test, but we're still going to work it. So let me write this down real quick. We got what? F of x equals negative 8x squared minus 24x plus 1. So let me see what they want. Vertex, min or max. range, increasing and decreasing. All right, so we're going to work this, although this one's been taken off. So let me go to my screen. All right, so first thing we'll do is find that vertex. So let's see, we know A is -8, B is -24, and C is 1. So let's find the x coordinate by doing -b over 2a. So that's going to be a -24 over 2 times my a, which is a -8. So the two negatives on top make that a +24. And then 2 times -8 is a -16. So this is going to stay a negative. So let's see. What I got? 24 divided by -16. So I'm going to turn that back into a fraction by hitting math and enter twice. So it should be what, a -3/2. So we know the x coordinate. So remember, to get the y coordinate, I find f of a -3/2. So that'll equal -8 times -3/2 squared minus 24 times -3/2 plus 1. So let me plug that in, -8 parentheses, -3 divided by 2, close parentheses and square, minus 24 times -3 divided by 2, close parentheses, and then plus 1. So then we hit enter, and looks like I get 19. So my vertex will be -3/2 and 19. So I want to know if I got a min or max. This time, since that first number is negative, so since this is negative, since it's negative, we got a maximum, okay, because it flips it over. And we got a maximum of the y value, which is 19. The range, remember, since this one's flipped over now, the highest point is the 19. So since the highest point is 19, your range always has to go from bottom up. So it starts at -infinity down here, and it's going until it hits 19. So my range would be parenthesis, -infinity, all the way to 19, and use a bracket. So the range uses brackets on numbers, okay? Increasing and decreasing use parentheses only. So I'm increasing on the left side. So remember, you're looking at the x's now, and the vertex had an x value of -3/2. So you're coming in, you're increasing on the left side, which would be from -infinity to a -3/2. You're going to decrease on the right side, which is going down. It's going to start at the -3/2. And then it's decreasing as the x's head out towards positive infinity. Okay, so the main thing, once again, is getting this vertex point. Once you got that, then you can pretty much get everything else, okay? So let's go put this in. Okay, so I'll start with my vertex, use my parentheses. That would be a -3/2. And then we got 19. We said it had a maximum, and the maximum value was the 19 we got. The range we said was from -infinity. So let me use parentheses. negative infinity, comma, up to the negative 3 divided by 2. And then close parentheses. Whoops, hang on. See how that did that? You got to arrow out before you close in parentheses, okay? And then we said increasing, we were increasing from negative infinity to negative 3/2. So let's go negative infinity. And then this was a negative 3/2. And then decreasing went from the negative 3/2 to the positive infinity. All right, then we would move on to the next one. So 14 was the second one I took off. All right, so 15, let me get the formula there. So they're giving us this formula, h of t. So h of t, which means the height of the rocket, depends on time, equals negative 16t squared plus 64t plus 3. So they got that from the height of the pad was 3 feet, it said, above the ground. It started out at 64 feet per second, and then negative 16t squared is the gravity pull. So how long will it take it to reach the maximum height, which is my t, which will be like my x, and then the maximum height will be the y value. So first, let's get the time. So time will be like the x, that's going to be negative b over 2a, which will equal negative 64 over 2 times negative 16. That gives me a negative 64 over a negative 32. And let's see, the negatives cancel, making that a positive 2. So it takes 2 seconds. Okay, so I would put that 2 right here. So that's pretty quick. Now to find the height it reaches, I got to find the h of t, which will be h of 2, which will equal negative 16 times 2 squared plus 64 times 2 plus 3. All right, so here we go. Let me clear that. Negative 16 times 2 squared plus 64 times 2 plus 3. So we hit enter, and that gives me 67, which means the rocket reaches a maximum height of 67 feet. So we would put our 67 right there and move on. All right, find a domain. What is that? F of x equals the square root of a 5x plus 3. So let me switch screens real quick and show you what I do on that one. So the domain of a radical like this, you take what's underneath the radical, 5x plus 3 has to be greater than or equal to 0. And then you solve that. So subtract 3. I get 5x is greater than or equal to a negative 3, and then divide by 5. So x has to be greater than or equal to a negative 3/5. So let me see how they did that on their answers. Now I was thinking this one gave us the actual answers. All right, we don't want that not equal. You use not equals when it's fractions. This one has greater than or equal. This one has less than or equal. We need greater than or equal to the negative 3/5, which is B. Oh, that's wild. They gave you all the answers pretty much, 3/5. So you knew you had to get a 3/5 on that, okay? And let me see. All right, 17, graph the function. Well, we know that all the basic functions of the square roots always start in the middle and go up. But remember, what's that plus 6 doing? That plus 6, since it's inside with the x, is actually going to move me left 6 units. So look, A went up, B went right, C, they flipped it around. Well, we don't got nothing that's going to flip it around over the y-axis especially. But look at this one. If you zoom in, you can see that that went left to 6. So pick D and move on. So these are basically just knowing what you know about those transformations, okay? So see, this one said graph it. So if you wanted to do this quick, go to your calculator, put in the radical, second x squared to get your radical, and then do 7x minus 1. Okay? And then hit graph. So notice mine came up to the right. Oh, I got two close ones. Let me look at these D's and A and see what their differences are. All right, so when in doubt, go to your table. And notice anything at 0 or left is undefined, and it looks like this one's hitting the 0 still. But notice this one is a little bit more right. Okay, I'm going to zoom this in a little more. Yeah, and that's going actually left of it, so we need D for sure. All right, then you would move on. Ooh, I don't like that when they make them that close. All right, so this one's not bad. They're giving you a piecewise function. F of x will equal 4x if your x is less than -5. F of x will equal x plus 2 if your x is in between -5 but less than 2. And it'll equal x squared for any x's greater than 2 and equal to the 2, right? So this says, which equation would you use to find f of 2? Well, y'all, 2 is not less than -5. This one says x has got to be less than 2. This one says x can equal 2 or be greater than 2. So I would use the x squared graph, which is b. And then move on. All right, what do we got here? 20. List the intervals where it's increasing. So notice it's increasing right here on the left side to this point on the x, and then it's increasing on this little slanted line right here. So I'm going to zoom this in a little bit. So first, let me start with my parentheses. So remember, these always use parentheses. So this first one's coming in on the x's until I hit the x value of -8. So it's coming in from -infinity. So go from -infinity, comma, and then it stops decreasing on this one at -8 on the x's. Close those parentheses, and then do a comma. Because see, it says use a comma to separate my answers, and then put the next interval up. So this part's increasing. It starts at this x value of -3, and then it's increasing till this x value of -2, and then close parentheses. Now, where is it decreasing? Well, I've only got one spot where it's decreasing, and it's this little part right here. So it starts decreasing at the -8. So let's put parentheses, -8, comma, and it decreases to right here, which is at -6 on the x-axis. So that only had one part downhill. And then constant will be this straight line right here, and then the straight line up here. So let's do this first one. The first one starts at -6, and it goes straight across until it hits this this x value right here of -3. Close those parentheses and then do a comma, open parentheses again, and let's get this straight line. This one starts at the x value of -2, and it keeps going and going and going and going forever as it heads out towards positive infinity. All right, let's see. That looked like 2 increasing, 1 decreasing, and then 2 constant. All right, y'all, then you move to the next one. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. I do that every time. I want to go to the next question. So we want 21. All right, 21 has been taken off. I'm still going to do it, but it's still been taken off. So does the function have a maximum or minimum? It's got a maximum, so you would click maximum. The relative maximum occurs at x equals, what is that, -6.5? So I'm trying to see what that x value is right there. Looks like -6.5 and has a value of 5.25. So once again, that vertex has everything we need. Then it says, where's it increasing? It's increasing on the left side as it comes into x's. So it's coming in from -infinity until it hits this x value of -6.5. So -infinity, -6.5, and then decreasing is going to start at that -6.5 as you head out towards positive infinity. So -6.5 to a positive infinity. All right, then move on. I'm trying to see how many I've eliminated so far. All right, so it looks like 22 is the 5th one that I took off of here, okay? So we'll still do this. It's got everything here. So the relative maximum is this point right here, and it has a value of -1 at x equaled a -5. It has a relative minimum right here of, oh, that was like -33. And that happened at the x value of +3. So increasing will be this section right here and the last section right here. So it's increasing from -infinity to the -5. And then it starts increasing again from 3 to positive infinity. So what do we say? -infinity to -5, and then 3 to positive infinity would be D. And then decreasing is going to be from that -5 to that +3. So let's see, -5, +3. All right, y'all, then we move on. All right, so let me write this down. We got h of x equals -2x minus 16 for x less than -7. It equals 1 for -7 less than or equal to x less than 1. and then it equals x plus 7 for any x greater than or equal to 1. So I'm going to find h of negative 10, h of 0, h of 1, and h of 4. All right, so let's switch over to the pad. All right, so h of negative 10 is the first thing I'm going to do. Negative 10 is less than negative 7, so I would use the first equation, which is negative 2 times my x, which is negative 10, minus 16. All right, negative 2 times negative 10 is 20, minus 16, which will give me 4. So h of negative 10 will be 4. H of 0, 0 is in between negative 7 and 1, so I would use the second equation. Which, oh, it says h of 0 equals 1 no matter what. All right, then it wants me to find h of 1. 1 is not less than 1. 1 equals 1, so I would use the last equation, put a 1 in for the x, so I get 1 plus 7, which is 8. And then finally, h of 4. 4 is greater than 1, so I would use the last equation. So h of 4 will equal 4 plus 7, which gives us 11. So I got a 4, a 1, an 8, and 11. So I'll go punch them 4 numbers in. All right, so here we go. We had a 4, a 1, an 8, and 11. All right, then we would move on to the next. So 24, stuff we did yesterday. So they're giving me f of x equals 4x plus 6. And then they're giving me f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. So they give you the formula here, okay? So remember, the first thing you got to do is find f of x plus h. So you take your equation 4, replace the x with an x plus h, and then plus 6. All right, so remember to do this, you would distribute to get rid of parentheses. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times h is 4h plus my 6. So since I cannot do anything to that, that's going to be my f of x plus h. Then I'll subtract my f of x, and all of that will be over h. All right, so put what we just got, 4x plus 4h plus 6 in for the f of x plus h. Oh, y'all ain't seeing my screen, are you? All right, so y'all keep me on track. So I want y'all to see this. So what I did, f of x was 4x plus h. I replaced the x with an x plus h. So then I distributed, got 4x, 4h, and then my 6. I put that into the formula for my f of x plus h. Now my f of x they gave me, that was 4x plus 6. So remember, all this is over h. But remember, everything in the second parentheses has something to cancel with in the first. So this negative 4x cancels with the positive 4x. And remember, that negative 6 cancels with the positive 6. So I end up with a 4h over h. Now, cancel those h's. So your final answer is 4. So let me let y'all catch up because I knew I was not sharing when I started this one. All right, y'all, let's go put this in. So I said my final answer would be 4. And go. All right, so that left me with one more question. It's going to be the same thing, but it's just a little more tougher, okay? So let me write what we given. This one says f of x equals 7x squared plus 3x plus 9. And we're going to do the same thing to this. So let me go to the screen because this one's trickier. All right, so the first thing I got to find is f of x plus h. That's going to equal 7 times x plus h squared plus 3 times x plus h plus 9. Now remember, we FOILed out x plus h squared yesterday. That was an x plus h times x plus h. So x times x was an x squared. X times h was an hx. H times x is a hx. And then h times h is a h squared. So when you add like terms, you get an x squared. Hx plus hx is 2hx plus h squared. So I would plug that into this. So I got 7 times what I just got, x squared plus 2hx plus h squared plus 3 times x plus h plus my 9. Y'all remember, I'm still finding f of x plus h here, okay? So here I'm going to distribute to 7. Here I'll distribute to 3. Then I'll bring down my 9. 7 times x squared is 7x squared. 7 times 2 is 14hx. 7 times h squared is a 7h squared. Plus 3 times x is 3x. 3 times h is 3h. Plus my 9. And guess what? No like terms, so all of this is f of x plus h. And then I'll minus my f of x, and all of that will be over h. So let's put this in, 7x squared plus 14hx plus 7h squared plus 3x plus 3h plus 9. F of x they gave me, 7x squared plus 3x plus 9, all over h. But remember, all three of these are going to cancel, because that makes that a negative 7x squared, cancels with the positive 7x squared. That's going to make that a negative 3x. It's going to cancel with the positive 3x. That's going to make that a negative 9. It's going to cancel with a positive 9. So once again, this parenthesis is gone. So what we got left? We got a 14hx plus 7h squared plus 3h all divided by h. So remember, all three on the top, since they're divided by h, you cancel one h from everybody. So that h would cancel, giving you a 14x plus h squared divided by h leaves me 1h, so that'll be a 7h. 3h divided by h, the h's cancel, leaving me a 3. And y'all, nothing else you can do to that, so that would be our final answer. So we would go back and plug that in. So I got what, a 14x plus 7h plus 3. All right, then what you would do after you're done, submit your quiz and be done. All right, so let me go back to my. Oh, let's see what happened on this. It didn't like one of my answers. What did we do? 14. We're going to look at this real quick. Oh, I think 14 was the one I took off. So let me see what I did on that real quick, so we can fix any errors. Oh, hell. I put that on my paper and then I wrote it wrong on here because it went to the 19. Okay. So I just got to pay attention to what I'm doing. All righty, so I'm going back to the home. All right, so I seen that. I had it wrote in my paper right, but then I wrote it on that wrong. All right, y'all, so let's stop this recording.